Which memo?
We all wearing red today.
No, no red for me. What's wrong, Lori?
I said, doesn't it feel like we were just here?
It's all a
You
blur.
too, Mike?
It's a blur.
City council last night.
Yeah. I didn't have to say much until the urban renewal
Oh,
agency meeting.
oh boy.
Okay, I'm just going to admit them all. What you need help with?
Well,
What's-
it doesn't want to turn on. I have this problem often. I don't
It's
know.
unplugged from the wall back there.
There.
And look, I'm already a productive member of the
Thank
committee.
you.
Would you like a job in Public Works?
St. Michelle bought A to Z.
I've never done a committee
Yeah,
like this.
my time it took me being a banker, I decided if I wanted to be a banker for life. I went and sold wine for a little bit. Gotcha. Okay. Looks like we did wrong. So I called on the grocery store.
All right, how is everyone doing this evening?
Good.
All right.
Short week, a lot crammed in a short amount of days.
Yep. Excellent. We're gonna go ahead and call this meeting to order, 6:07 PM. And start us off with the Pledge of Allegiance.
I pledge
Allegiance to the flag of the United States of America, and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
All right, we'll get a roll call out of the way.
Thank you. Chair Lawson,
Here.
Vice Chair Barron,
Here.
Jacqueline Hunt is excused this evening. Mike Cardy.
Here.
Thank you. And Lisa Butler, we have heard from, she is on her way in. And your ex officio is Counselor Trista Pavin up there on the Zoom screen.
Good evening, and thanks for being here this evening with us. I don't believe there was any public comments submitted ahead of time.
There was not.
We have a couple new names on the Zoom call as well. If anyone has any public comment at this time, we can welcome that. All right, we'll move forward. Last month's meeting minutes. Just a quick kind of rundown. We added Michael to the committee last month. He just met last night with city council, got that squared away. So now it's official. We discussed some topics and how we can meet with Mary Bosch coming up, the downtown consultant. Got a nice rundown from the mayor and Bill on some updates on OBI bus tour, some UGB expansion, things like that. Any questions or comments on last month's meeting minutes?
I'll make the motion to approve the minutes.
I second. All those in favor, say aye.
Aye.
And all those opposed? Excellent. with the meeting minutes approved, we can just keep rolling along. It looks like Colin Russell, our guest speaker for this evening, was gonna hop on. Looks like he's joined us via Zoom. We'd like to discuss a development piece of land on Glencoe here and just talk about how we as a committee can potentially help with that and just get involved, whether it's just being informed and educated on that. So Colin, I don't know if you or Bill want to just do a quick intro.
Yeah, sure. Can you hear me? Yeah. So thank you for the handoff. Yeah, I'm Colin Russell. I'm a commercial real estate broker. I work with Colliers International, and we are marketing a build-to-suit out on 21 acres that's owned by Far West Recycling. And you know, we're at the preliminary stages of marketing the building. I think you guys probably saw the marketing brochure of the opportunity, but we have a range of what we're marketing of 200 to 400,000 square feet of industrial space. And we put it out to the market maybe 2 or 3 weeks ago. And so it's pretty early on, but we have gotten a good reception to the opportunity thus far from the market. And we are working on one deal that would leave Far West Recycling about a 100,000 square foot building. And then we have a spec, what we call the spec building, which would we would lease to a tenant that's looking for around 200,000 feet. And so it'd be a split into 2 different lots. And yeah, I mean, we're just excited about having an opportunity of this size on the west side of town. You know, as everyone knows, there's not a lot of large blocks of industrial space on the west side. And so we're excited to be able to have this opportunity and think it's a good one. And yeah, we're excited about it.
Excellent, thank you. I'll kind of open it up to any questions the committee might have, just in terms of the overall process or that plan specifically.
Yeah, does anyone have any questions specifically about the building or the specs on the building?
I guess my question is the most practical one. How can the committee support? Sounds like you already got some people that are interested in it. Where do we jump in, and how can we support getting across the finish line?
Yeah. So, you know, it is pretty preliminary. I think that, you know, right now we're really working on the design phase. I mean, we haven't pinned down what plan we're going with, just because, you know, a lot of it is contingent on if this tenant wants to move forward. I think that, you know, at this point, the perception is that North Plains is a great jurisdiction to work with, which I think is great. I think that not every jurisdiction has that reputation. And so I think having, you know, being able to get pretty much all the decision makers in one room to make decisions is very, very appealing. And so, you know, the fact that that's the case and we could possibly get a building built faster than some of the other locations that might have a similar offering is very appealing. But at this point, I don't think that there's a whole lot more that the city can do to help, because everyone that we've worked with has done a really good job thus far, and I imagine that that's going to continue through the process.
You had mentioned industrial. Do you have? I know you probably have privacy that you can't share too much of details, but can you give us a little bit of idea of what the company is that's going to be going in there?
No, unfortunately not at this point. We have, you know, confidentiality agreements signed and all that. And, but I would say that just as a kind of a general notion, you know, like I said, Far West Recycling, that's pretty clear cut because they own the site and they want to build a building on it. And, you know, they want to occupy part of the site. But in regards to the rest of the activity, it's, you know, it's mostly distribution users. You know, it's pretty much the groups that you would think would have interest in the site have interest in the site. I don't think that it's leaning towards one subset of a type of tenant. It's just kind of the normal players that you would think would be interested in a large block of industrial space out here.
Those are,
Colin, thank you for being here. I have a question that's just kind of depends on how many answers you have to it. What questions do you get about North Plains from people who are looking at this site? Do you get questions about power capacity? Do you get questions about road and transportation access? What kind of questions do you get? Property tax questions? Do you get water questions? Do you get incentive questions, enterprise zone, those sorts of things? What types of questions? North Plains is not well known for being a place like this, but we're going to see much more of this in the future. And so it would be great to hear what you hear, if anything, so far on those sorts of topics. What questions?
Yeah, so that's a good one. I would say that there's not, a set of consistent questions. I think that the opportunity is relatively straightforward. I think that mainly the questions that come up are in regards to the timeline of delivering a building, just because the market is so tight on the west side that mainly the timeline is the most important question. I think I reached out to you not too long ago in regards to the power capacity. I think that is also one that has come up just to see if there could be enough power to support a data center is one question that has bubbled up. We haven't had, 5 data centers clamoring over the site, wondering the power capacity, but it is something that's popped up. And so I think that's a big one. But, in regards to everything else, I mean, access is pretty straightforward. Specific tax credits for being in the city of North Plains, I mean, that hasn't been asked, but I think that that's probably on users' minds. But other than that, there isn't like a consistent question that I've been fielding from prospects.
Thank you. So my follow-up question, Colin, is are answers to those questions or information about those sorts of that would help address those questions is the city better served by having targeted, concise information on its website somewhere, or what's the best way the city can communicate information out there in anticipation of what will likely be questions that get asked more and more? How can the city be proactive on addressing some of those questions?
Yeah, I mean, it's interesting. I mean, this is obviously the last remaining currently industrial zone parcel. And so it's, until the time that there is more land that's brought in, I don't necessarily think that there needs to be a whole lot of proactive work done on that aspect. I think that this is probably going to be a little bit of a learning lesson just going through this process, because it is a larger building for the jurisdiction. And I think it's probably best to just play defense. And there are going to be questions specifically with this tenant that we're working on a deal with. As we move through the process, there's going to be more questions that bubble up. And I think that for the time being, it's probably best to just play defense and field those questions, and it will probably generate some conversations, and then we can get the questions answered for any specific inquiries that these tenants have. But at this point, I think knowing the wattage and knowing the power capacity is just a good thing to know. But other than that, I don't think that there needs to be a ton of work that needs to be done to put on the website to try to make these opportunities more attractive, because they're attractive because there's nothing else like it, and that's what's going to drive people to the site, and then they'll ask the questions. So I don't think that a whole bunch of preemptive work needs to go into it. I think that given the uniqueness of it, we field the questions, we see what comes our way, and then we just make a point to whatever the questions that are asked specifically. We try to get quick answers for these prospects to show them that we're friendly and interested in getting a deal done here, and that we're not in any way, dragging our feet. We want to, get something done here. So that would be my recommendation, is that whatever questions come our way, we just make a point to field them and get the questions answered back to the prospects as quickly as possible.
Bill, before we get to that, I have a question for you. Does the city, I know, so in Forest Grove, they had like a prospective business packet that had pretty much every bit of information that anyone coming to the city would need. Gave them details on like who to contact for, certain permits, water bill, electric bill, all that fun stuff is in one neat packet that they had, and they could pick up from either the chamber or from the city office. Do we currently have something like that for the city of North Plains?
Chris, we do not have a packet to hand out, a physical printed one, but all of that is on one page, one URL at the city website.
Perfect. Okay.
So, yes, so new resident, there's one page for new residents moving in, everything they need to know. And there's one page for new businesses moving in, all of that sort of information. We may be missing some information, which is why which was Colin's answer to the question was very helpful.
Yeah.
So we may be missing some information. That's possible.
That could be something that we as a group could take a look at.
Because when we get to talking about the Knights of Pythias building, the mission of this group is going to be changing. And so Councilor Papin has a question in chat. I don't know, Colin, can you see the question or shall I read it?
Yeah, I was just reading it. Let's see. Yeah. In regards to I would have to check with the architect and go back. I don't know what the traffic impact looks like for the specific tenant in Far West. I would have to go back and see. I mean, I know that there is concern, from the neighborhood, in regards to, recycling specifically and just overall impact. It's always a tough thing when there's different zoning abutting other zoning, but I guess Far West is specifically is they're part of the community. They like to be well respected within the community, and they are good neighbors in their other locations. In this specific location, one design plan that we're looking at is putting them to the north end of the site. So there would be a buffer of another building between that and the residential area across West Union. So that, I mean, I don't know how to answer these questions, but I will say as a blanket statement, they are, they are very conscious on how they're perceived in the community, and they don't want to come in and create problems either. They want to be a good neighbor. But, remember what they're trying to do is they're trying to, number one, they're operating business. They're also trying to, do a good job at what they do and help the community from a recycling standpoint. So I think I can't answer that question directly in terms of all the trip counts and all that, but I would say, yeah, as a blanket statement, they are very conscious of disrupting and being a good neighbor. And I think that they'll do their best to make sure that they can, be on the site and run their business, but then also, not disrupt the rest of the neighbors.
Indeed, I would just add that we do have other Far West facilities in the Portland metro region as examples of what they have done as a good neighbor, working with the city where they're operating, and what they have worked with on other cities if there have been concerns. So I don't want the impression to be given. I think Colin did a very good job of explaining that. I would think, and what we've seen from Far West elsewhere is they've put their best foot forward and have worked with cities on different things to either mitigate or avoid negative impacts that might happen from what they're doing. But we as a city do have other cities and other examples to look at to work with an application like this. So there's that. Thank you, Councillor. I guess the other question the last question, I don't want to keep you too terribly long, Colin, just for my benefit. I'm not going to ask about what particular tenants or businesses, you've already said you can't get into that per se, maybe it's too early or maybe you just can't, but where do you see, what types of businesses do you see looking here potentially? And what I mean by that is, in our land use planning for the UGB, a big part of demand or a big part of potential, opportunity for the city of North Plains isn't necessarily the big blue chip nationwide recruitment type development that Hillsborough scores every now and then. We see a lot of need simply from the fact that businesses in other communities have no room to expand at all. Maybe they have expanded onto multiple locations elsewhere in different cities. Maybe they're just really cramped on their existing property or facility and they really need to be able to expand, but there's just no place to do it. How would you characterize the more likely profile of businesses who might look at this site and maybe at North Plains in the future? Would you say it's more existing Oregon businesses who need to expand somewhere and there just isn't? Or do you think that there's going to be more demand or a sizable amount of demand coming from just flat out new businesses to the region?
Yeah, I mean, I think it's all of the above. I mean, like what we discussed, I mean, this is a good data point because it is the only thing like it, of size. And so, the tricky part is that it is, to get a building built, it is going to be, say like another, 21 months or so. So it's not, I think that if it was probably built right now, we could fill it up, even if it was a 250 or 400,000 square foot building, I think we could fill it up. But there's a lag time there. And a lot of these bigger users are looking, 2 years out because there are no other opportunities. And so it will be interesting to flush through this marketing process to really continue to field calls to see what direction they're coming from and who they are. But I think it's all of the above of who you're talking about that could be potential candidates for the site. It's just, a lot of it comes down to the lack of other opportunities. I mean, this is the only opportunity on the west side that is of 400,000 square foot footprint possibly. And so part of it is that there's no other opportunities, and that's what's driving, prospects to our site. But, in regards to who they might be, it could be all over the board because, it's not going to be one specific type of user. I mean, we could speculate on what's coming from the Sunset Corridor and those types of businesses, but I think that because there's no other opportunities of size, that different groups that might not be pushed towards this site would be pushed towards it because they have nowhere else to go. And like what you were talking about is that they're having growing pains in their existing location. And when you start having existing growing pains, it starts being limited on business, and so that's what's going to get people interested in. And really taking a jump up in space consideration because they see this opportunity and they say, what, this is our opportunity. If we don't take this, who knows how much longer it's going to be until we, can find an opportunity of size.
Very good. Well, thank you, Colin.
Colin, I got another question for you.
Yeah.
How can this group, so when you as a broker are looking for places, how are you hearing about it? Like, and how can we get in front of a larger group of brokers and talk a little bit more about North Plains? I know there's things like chamber events and there's things like NARI that are very specific to certain industries, but how can we get in front of a group of commercial brokers and sell the city of North Plains as a place to start, having you guys look at for when you have people asking to expand?
Yeah, I mean, I think that, I guess number one, just so you guys know kind of our marketing channels. So as a commercial real estate broker, we use a few different databases that broadcast out to the world. So really, this opportunity is out there in the world. We use a database called CoStar and then also LoopNet. And so both of those cover all the brokers in the world. And then also the LoopNet is generally geared towards the public. So companies and the public can look at this opportunity as well. We also use something called vertical email, which is a broadcast email that goes out to I'd have to look back, but when I sent this out, maybe it went to 450 commercial real estate brokers. I think that if there was anything that you guys wanted to say or advocate for yourselves, it's probably best fit to put on our marketing flyer. If you guys really, and I know that it seems like it would be a great thing to get in front of a bunch of real estate brokers, but at this point, I don't know really how that would happen. I think that if there was a time when there was going to be more land brought in from, into the urban growth boundary and it was a bigger deal, I would think that maybe we could think and strategize on that. But at this point, this is just the one opportunity. And I think that if anyone's looking in this area and wants to be in North Plains, their eyes are on this marketing flyer. And so I'd be happy to, anything that you thought that would be helpful to add to the marketing flyer to help increase the chances of people, coming to North Plains versus maybe other locations. That's what I think would probably be the best fit, because so many people see the marketing material and go through that. I think that at this point, that would be the best bet. I wish I could say that we could get 400 real estate brokers in a room and you guys could make your case to why North Plains is great, because I think that it is. It's just, I just don't know how exactly that could be the case at the current time.
I think the marketing flyer is a good spot. Do you have Colin's contact info?
Mhm.
Okay, sweet.
I do.
We will definitely follow up with you on the marketing flyer. I think that's a great place to start.
Yeah, what kinds of, and I don't want to take up too much time, but I guess so say that we're selling, what would we put on the marketing flyer to say, hey, tenants come to North Plains, don't go to Hillsborough? What would we put on the, not saying Hillsborough is bad, but like if because that's what we're trying to do, is we're trying to advocate. So it's like, so what would we put on the marketing flyer that could help incentivize?
Yeah, well, I don't think remember, this is a public recorded meeting, so we're not going to bash on Hillsborough.
No.
No, I think I was just looking at what's on the city's website as far as, advertising why businesses should come here. There's some solid material on there that I don't think a lot of, it's just not common knowledge that our taxes are lower than the other cities, that, it's relatively friendly for industrial. You got really great access to the freeway, especially if anyone's doing any business at the coast or doing any business in Portland. It's kind of pretty sweet. So no, I think there's definitely some stuff we can get to you. Bill has your email and I will be bugging you soon, I'm sure.
Yeah, no, that's perfect. And yeah, definitely don't want to bash on Hillsborough, but what we can do is show the reasons why North Plains is great, and anything that you guys could come up with or we could strategize on. I'm happy to add that to the marketing material and make sure that all that information is broadcasted out.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Thank you, Colin. Anybody else with any other questions?
I believe Trista had her hand raised.
Oh, okay. Yeah.
You answered my question from Bill's question. Thank you.
Yeah.
Okay, I think that we're at a good point to keep going along. Thank you, Colin, for your time. We appreciate you joining us.
Yeah, thank you guys for the opportunity. I appreciate it.
Thank you, Colin.
All right.
Perfect. We'll keep rolling along then, kind of diving into a different topic of downtown, meeting with Mary, steps we can take prior to meeting with Mary to kind of be prepared for discussions with her. We can kind of tie that into point B on our agenda of the Knights of Pythias building as well. So I guess, Bill, do you know by chance if Mary will have a specific presentation she's going to go through? Is it more of a workshop?
She'll go through a presentation that she has shared with this body, but in advance of a previous meeting that ended up not happening.
Gotcha.
But she'll kind of do it in a conversational type workshop format. That's the word I'm looking for. And looking to have it in the November meeting, the first Wednesday of November. We would like to try to market and cajole members of city council to come to that meeting, because one of the things she'll be talking about is how to, for lack of a better word, anoint a city economic development committee to have kind of a work plan and mission that council relies on. Like you actually have responsibilities. You're not just an audience, you have responsibilities. And so she'll talk, that's structurally economic development, how a city sets up its committees, different committees and that sort of thing is a big topic. So, yes. So shall we talk about the Knights of Pythias building?
Yeah.
We should call it the Nuts of Pythias building. It's Pilgrim, is it Pilgrim's Nuts?
Pilgrim Nuts
Pilgrim Nuts
with a Z.
with a Z, that's correct. Is leasing the ground floor of the Knights of Pythias building.
Oh, awesome.
Now, that company this should be their first kind of retail location. Their business model and how they've grown is basically doing events all over the Pacific Northwest and selling their own manufactured small batch seeds, nuts, that sort of thing, flavored snacks at different events. And then they also organize events in different places and just kind of from building the experience of being at those events. So on the one hand, it was a surprise hearing that they were leasing the space, which you know, I know that past businesses that have looked at the Knights of Pythias first floor, there's been, I think there was like a cabinet maker or a cabinet retailer, and nothing against the business like that, but this type of business will be a little bit more of a draw for people to hang out in downtown longer, or maybe even come to downtown. What I particularly am interested in exploring with them as they get settled in and we work with them is just the background and event planning.
Yeah.
COVID sort of knocked the legs out from under an event idea that we were working on with her way before any of the conversation started to lease the building. So I think there's a lot of opportunity there, and so I don't think we certainly don't have to think about how to market the building. We have a tenant there, or the Knights of Pythias have a tenant that I think that this committee can probably fairly easily work with on some things.
Sure. So we can pivot our focus from market to now. We did our job with that.
Wow.
We can take credit.
Good job.
No, I think the biggest thing that we gotta think of now is supporting the new business going in and making sure that we market them so they don't die on the vine. I mean, retail and a specialized retail in a small town, it scares me a little bit unless there's a lot of support.
Well, and you probably, I know that I ran into their business at St. Helens when they were there for the Halloween fest that St. Helens does several years ago. So, yeah, and so they have a pretty, I think, robust online ordering
They do.
business. So even if this is just a storefront for them, for their followers, I think there's some foundation there.
Yeah, you guys should
already.
check out their webpage. They have
Yeah,
dozens
They're-
and
I mean, they're
dozens of
amazing.
kind of
they're
flavors
fantastic.
and all these different kinds of nuts and yeah, so.
So they're using it more as like a distribute, like will be their corporate.
And that's my question, yeah, that's my question, more
Yeah.
distribution or more like walk in?
No.
We don't know yet, so that will be part of the discovery process.
Yeah.
Okay, because yeah, we definitely want to support them as far as, you know, they've done half of our job of signing a lease. Now we gotta help them make sure that they feel welcomed and blow their business up with the local residents. I think that's where we step in on this.
And I think one thing, I've noticed them, they have their products sold in some of the other small, local markets around, like the Hillsborough one, the Collective, they sell their products there. So even that is potential
That's really cool.
advertising.
Yeah.
mechanism.
Well, and then like, I mean, to that point too, it's like, then we work alongside them, say, hey, like, let's make sure that you guys have pop-ups that say like, now have a storefront in North Plains, so we can get those people that are going to those other sections to start driving out to North Plains to go there, but then also visit something else.
Mhm.
Like the new Mexican restaurant in town, which is delicious, by the way.
I went there for lunch and I was the only person in there in the lunch hour. It was kind of
Yeah.
sad.
We did that dinner the other day too.
Yeah, we've gone there twice, and like, that's another, I mean, when you think about like where we can help as economic development, I mean, we have someone with creative design expertise now.
I actually stopped in there this morning, took it upon myself because I do the city newsletter now. And I took September's newsletter in along with the sheet that lists the pricing for ads for city. And we don't have very many businesses that put ads in. You guys probably all see the same ones, Kennedy's, and sometimes Robinson's Florist. And so I explained it to them, the breakdown of prices. They're not a member of the chamber yet, but they said they're working on it. I offered them their first month of advertising. They would get a half a page ad at the quarter page price.
Nice.
Told them I'd help them create if they needed. He said, we don't have anybody that does marketing at this point. But I said, it's easy to make a little coupon that, 10% off or anything to, because I know all the things I'm seeing on the community page, Facebook page is all very positive.
Yeah,
Just need to get more of it, get more people in there, so.
I think that's like a perfect, if you want help with that, we can definitely help with that sort of thing. And football.
Yeah.
We is very.
it's a very loose we.
But yeah, I think that's a really good idea. And then it just kind of interconnects the various businesses and things like that.
Let's get over here, let's get over the state too.
Kind of back to meeting with Mary, then we can almost use Pilgrims maybe as just a case study in terms of focusing on that as a specific example of things we can do with Mary, whether it's an exercise or actually working with Pilgrims down the road on developing the downtown. And I know she will be able to apply a lot of what she's teaching us, telling us to a business like that. Were there any other points? And I know Michael, you weren't around when she presented a few months ago, but she's essentially helping develop kind of the downtown appeal and revitalization. And Lisa is on the downtown improvement committee. So we're all together kind of trying to figure out how we fit in with that, how we can help improve and revitalize downtown with some ongoing efforts that will kind of work hand in hand. So anything, Lisa, Chris, anyone specifically that we want to cover with Mary as far as you can think of?
Nothing on my radar. I think, Nights of Pythia and getting that film was the main thing that I've been focused on. And so I love coming to meetings and finding out that we don't focus on that anymore. We just put it out there and it just happens.
That's right.
We managed.
Yeah, that's what this group does. We manifest things, Bill.
It's nice, first for me.
I
Yeah.
mean,
I
the
like it.
only specific thing I remember from Mary's presentation that I really latched onto is she talked about one of the small towns that their economic committee created kind of a volunteer day every
Yeah.
year. And that's something I'd like to talk to her about more, like even as a committee, could we kind of sponsor that annually in a way to build small business or improve downtown or something like that.
That just reminded me of another thing. With Mary, there is something I want to talk to her about, which is like doing like the third Thursday. We had talked about that, or like a farmer's market or something. Because it was in that same town. They did that, but then they also started doing events on the main street, and that's really what brought the businesses and then also helped that. So that's,
And it sounds like we could partner with Pilgrims in terms of their event planning and potentially.
Yeah, I think that's a conversation that once they get up and running,
Yeah.
that's a conversation to have with them because she's already expressed interest in doing some kind of event or events, markets in downtown North Plains. So but COVID running longer, closures running longer than expected, sort of, again, just sort of took the wind out of that.
We have had residents ask about a market, a Wednesday night market or whatever, and apparently there used to be one back in the day here and it kind of died out, but she had, I don't know what her name is, Mrs. Pilgrim's nuts. Yeah, anyway, she was just jumped all over that. She's got tons of experience putting these things together and so, you know, we wouldn't have to start from scratch on some of those.
Vendor relationships with other,
Yeah.
Yeah.
you know, market.
Definitely.
thing. So. Yeah, that'll be a conversation to have. I guess the other thing I would say, the other moving part in all of this, you've got Mary, you have the tenant, you have Pilgrim's Nuts moving into Knights of Pythias building. Monday starts our rare volunteer from the University of Oregon that will be working very specifically. Well, 85% of their work program is working on things all downtown related. So their work program is specifically start working on an event or two, a one-timer, or beginning to kind of work on an event that repeats somehow. Once every few months, once a month, once a week, whatever. And then getting the city involved in the Oregon Main Street program, they'll be the point person for that. His name is Douglas, and he participated in the call or in the downtown meeting last week. He called in ahead of time before formally starting with the city. So he'll be kind of drinking from the fire hose as far as what we hope him to work on and everything that's going on. But I'm sure he'll be at the next meeting, and Andy and I are meeting Friday just to kind of nail down what we throw at him the very first day and how we kind of set him on a course to be ready to jump into some things sooner rather than later. And so that'll kind of come together by next month. Certainly. But I'm sure he'll be at these meetings regularly.
So we gotta get Douglas and Miss Pilgrim's at a meeting together.
Yes, and maybe get Karen with Pilgrim's Nuts. I'm pretty sure that's her first name. And I haven't seen her in months, but and then Douglas, and then Mary. So we kind of have some orbits that are coming together on a few.
Excellent. Cool. That's kind of a good segue into, Lisa, I was hoping you could share some updates from Downtown Improvement Plan Committee.
And both Bill and Lori, I think, were there, so jump in if you have any other things. They used the full 2 hours, the 2-hour meeting, and this, at least I think it was the first time that I saw the consultants come with some really specific recommendations for the city, at least a start. We didn't cover everything, but there was a start. And then probably available, they had a very extensive presentation and packet of information if anyone would like to go and look at it. Some of the things are just interesting visuals that they put together. So let me see if I can kind of classify the things. The biggest thing they talked about, probably the least controversial, they talked about some code change recommendations for the city, which almost everyone was aligned with. Some were some pretty basic standards for commercial street in terms of how many windows you would have, not even signage, or like how many windows would you have in terms, and this would be for new structures, not necessarily existing. We talked a little bit about parking, so there was some discussion about that. But basically some of the things they said, well, we don't recommend, I think they said in the future, maybe some recommendations about zoning changes for future build outs, like maybe no more heavy industrial coming farther down commercial towards the east. But for the most part, everyone there was in agreement with what they had recommended. So not too much that was controversial there. And one of the things we discussed a lot is more of their visual architectural consultant came in with 4 different ideas for what they would do with the warehouses that with all the murals on Commercial Street. And I don't know all the backstory, but it sounds like there's not even any agreement that the owner will sell those. But he came in with 4 different ideas on how you might make them more attractive for businesses.
Yeah, I mean, the owner doesn't have to sell them. I mean, if the owner would just agree to the improvements, perhaps partnered with the urban renewal agency, it can still happen. We just have to have an owner that's willing in some way.
And yes, I'm not sure where that stands.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
The owner is on the downtown committee. He and his wife regularly attend meetings. This one they weren't able to. which is unusual. So I'm sure they're seeing or will see the concepts, and then we can talk about that. So.
But it's a very creative idea, so that would make it more attractive if you were to have some pedestrian traffic and have some kind of business or food or something inside the building.
I'm sorry.
Were there any, not necessarily structural, but improvements as far as like changing the building itself or just visually?
Yeah, like even like popping out the front so that there's a walkway behind it, or the last one he came up with that he threw out was, well, what if we raise the murals up so that you could walk underneath them and then access the business inside? Or what if we were able to come from the sides of the building into the businesses? So quite, yeah, but multiple proposals that we had for making it a good commercial area. And then he was also the consultant who brought in 4 different styles for what you would want to see for lighting and garbage cans and things like that on Main Street, and we talked about those. And I guess, and the next step is for city council to kind of take those and decide what they want to do, but it seems like where we landed is they said, well, a mixture of maybe like railroad town, agricultural town, and light industrial town.
Railroad chic.
Yeah, there was a comment at the meeting that the city had already decided on a railroad theme, and that was 20-something years ago.
Oh, really?
And it was really just the chamber. It really wasn't the city, it was more the chamber. That was the marketing idea and direction. And you kind of see the railroad, the kind of train on the signage around town. That's kind of what materialized. But there's plenty of room for new or additional to that for downtown. So if the committee identifies rural agricultural as the theme that should kind of permeate what kind of cobble to use, what kind of garbage in cans or bike racks, that's all. That's current planning and current idea. So, yeah.
Sorry, Michael, did you?
I was just gonna say, pardon my ignorance, of what's inside those buildings?
I only know one thing.
What is not?
We can tell you what was, or what used to be in
I
it
can tell you that.
was
I know what's
fish
in-
meal. And on warm days,
Oh,
Oh,
it was horrible. Huh?
Yeah, each of the 4 buildings are rented out purely as storage. Well, have been until recently, all 4 buildings were purely storage, whatever anybody can jam in there if you rent the store. The building furthest east that's closest to Bertoni, Abbey Creek Winery, was fish meal. And it would get very ripe smelling when temperatures pick up in warmer months. That's been removed, and now Brian Free has further cleaned up the inside and basically has a maker studio in there where he makes old growth wooden furniture, mostly tables. Yeah, it's a great studio, and he was actually the host for the downtown meeting before the last one, actually the community workshop and community meeting. So in April, in the middle of a sleet storm and very cold temperatures, unexpectedly cold temperatures, we still had a ton of people show up, and we're just very pleasantly surprised by how big the inside of those buildings are and how actually structurally sound they are, how strong they are. They're not weak buildings just waiting to collapse. They're reinforced inside. They're very solid buildings. So it kind of got people thinking, wow, I think reusing these buildings. Brian has already done one type of reuse inside on his own, and getting discounts on rent to do it, but he's kind of put some sweat equity on cleaning it up. But there's opportunity for the other buildings over time. Yes, all gone, all gone.
And there was some comment about ODOT conflict with those buildings. I wasn't following entirely what that was.
The rear side of the buildings is the railroad, and there's a certain width of right of way where improvements can't be done, or there are restrictions on the improvements. And because of the age of the buildings, their improvements are grandfathered probably, but if we modify the buildings anyway, we have to be very careful about what that distance is.
That makes sense. Okay, I'll mention 2 other things that were discussed. We also talked about, if you remember that survey they had, the different transportation options on Commercial Street. and including the part where there are businesses and also then the part where there are more houses at the east end. And there was a survey about, do you want a sidewalk and a bike lane and then parking and then street? And so the consultants came up with their recommendation. And then but there was quite a bit of discussion. So I don't know if that's where they'll land. I think they basically said, kind of dining area, outdoor dining area on the business park and sidewalk and parking, no bike lane. And so there was quite a bit of discussion about, well, how does that work? We had discussion about, hey, what are we going to do? We still are going to have large trucks coming down on, you're always going to have large trucks on commercial. And they give, maybe not.
No, we don't always have to.
At least at the moment we do. And so there's some discussion around that, about what do you do and how do you protect cyclists and pedestrians. So I think that is probably still open. They're supposed to come back with a revision on that recommendation.
Yeah.
And I think, then the last part is they made a recommendation is if you can do it all now from all the way from Main Street down to Glencoe, do all the apartments. And if you can't, we recommend you focus on the Glencoe to 313th, or sorry, Main 313th first and do the rest later. And then close, like in the last 5 minutes of, well, how are we gonna fund this? And that was about it. Yes.
Which there are some resources, Greg?
There are some resources. Yes. I didn't say over what span of time. I didn't say immediate resources. I said there. My job is to project revenues out 20 years forward.
Amortize that expense, Bill.
Right.
Perfect. Thank you for the summary.
Yeah, it was good.
Yeah. It's pretty exciting, especially with the work the city's doing with the UGB expansion as well, just those two things. One item I did not throw on the agenda here, but I just speaking about downtown UGB expansion. Is there any update as far as Bill, with the Glencoe opportunity area?
Yes, Eric, there is. So last night, the Urban Renewal Board, which is City Council, they just changed their names and gavel a different meeting. That's how that works. They approved a 6-month extension of the agreement with the developer to continue planning the project. The developer is working their best to get extremely rapidly increasing and spiking costs of different kinds under control.
Yeah.
And so just yesterday, we had meetings with them, 1 in the morning, one in the afternoon, that, 2 hours total, I would say, where we were dealing with undergrounding utilities along Glencoe power in particular, and the cost of that and how to do it feasibly. And then in the afternoon, we had meetings about the cost of removing all the 6 inches of vegetation that's not solid for building. And then how much more of that might we have to remove because some of the soil does still have remnant of pollution from past ag use, particularly DDT and other chemicals when part of it was an orchard. That's still in the soil. And so it's not anything that if you walk up and touch is a hazard, but under state law, if you have to build and move it around, then it becomes something you have to deal with. So we're not talking hazard to the public, we're just talking meeting regulations about how to deal with something. So they're moving forward. I talked to the developer, well, both of us do, Andy and I. Their tenants are chomping at the bit to be here, particularly the grocery. Nobody's backing off, nobody's losing interest. But they get how it's going and what it is to work on building something new, particularly right now. And so we're just trying to work through and nail down and get some costs better understood and maybe some ways around where, fears about or worries about costs.
Did an environmental scan been done on the property?
Twice, and they did their own.
Did they?
Yeah,
Okay.
so, and that's part of the conversation is our geologist, our soils geologist and their environmental engineer. That was the call yesterday. And we just sort of talked about, well, does it have to go to this type of facility at this cost? Why can't it go to this facility at that cost? And some of this you were gonna be doing anyway, so is that really an additional cost? No, you're right, we actually had to do that anyway. So that's not a thing, it's just stuff like that, just that sort of conversation. So yeah.
But it's moving at least.
Oh, yes.
Perfect.
That's me.
Thank you, Bill.
Mhm.
Any other comments, notes, any committee members have before we adjourn?
I have one other thing.
Yes.
So as you may have seen in an email today, we have delayed the EOA adoption or hearing at the planning commission next week on Wednesday. And what that means is that we are delaying the EOA, excuse me, the UGP meeting that was planned. And the reason is because last night the council, DLCD, the deputy director, Kirsten Green, came and talked about North Plains and how it potentially has a very important role in semiconductor task force findings and planning for industry growth. And behind the scenes, or at least with staff directly, DLCD is asking us to, as much as possible, fold into what the task force has found plans to do in our planning to support, strengthen the legal argument and the regulatory argument and box checking for our UGB expansion. But their findings, the task force findings, the ink was dry 2.5 weeks ago. So we're dealing with an EOA that's been done, but we're talking about this potentially billions of dollars in investment in Oregon, the beginning of it, ink drying 2 weeks ago. So we've delayed the planning commission hearing the amendments to the EOA until October. We're working on getting a representative of the task force to address council this month at the next meeting to talk about what role North Plains plays in all this, so that we can kind of get things sewn up a bit better. And then once we do, this will go before planning commission. So instead of planning commission hearing the amendments next week at their regular meeting, I'm going to give a presentation about the task force's findings and what it may mean for North Plains. So you're welcome to come to that. You're welcome to wait until more of that information gets out. But there's too much at stake in terms of significant, amazing jobs producing investment potentially in North Plains. Letting this slip a month or a little bit more is low cost compared to missed opportunity. So that's where we are.
A couple of questions. Is that at all related to the CHIPS Act? Any connection?
Yeah, the CHIPS Act is the federal act and the release of funds and tax
And
credits.
this is related to that.
The Oregon Semiconductor Task Force is really the body that
Okay,
put together the framework for what to do with that money.
okay.
What we don't have are you city of and you X county and you are getting the money. That now begins. But we've put North Plains and our UGB expansion in front of them on a few different occasions, so they're aware.
It's exciting.
Very-
All right. If no one else has anything, I think that's a good solid hour for us.
Half of our work was done before we got here.
Very productive. So we'll go ahead and adjourn the meeting, 7:03 PM. Use the gap. All right. Thanks, everyone.
Erica?